Good morning, everybody. It's a great show for everyone today. It's Tuesday. It's especially great because you have Ryan Grimm in the house. Good to see you, my friend.
Gonna be an amazing show.
Always amazing. Yeah, you stole my line. It's a bro show, so it's okay. I will allow it. We've got a bunch of great topics today. We're gonna go.
I came up with amazing on my own. Have you said that before?
Did you? Yeah, that's my catchphrase.
You said
man.
that?
Yeah. All right. Let's see. We got Israel. We are going to talk a little bit about what's going on in terms of the latest with Netanyahu, what the IDF claims of their control over Gaza. They say have total control of the Gaza Strip. Ryan is going to break down for us some of the things that are going on inside of Israel, some of the domestic consternation, and some crackdown on terms of civil disobedience inside of the country. We are also going to preview for everybody probably the single most important meeting in the world happening tomorrow. President Biden sitting down with Xi Jinping. There's a lot to discuss. There also is an interesting moment, though, because President Biden will be meeting Xi in the city of San Francisco, which overnight has become clean. And there's a lot to say about that, I think. Next, we're going to talk about two very important stories. I know many of the people who watch the show are in California and actually a lot in the city of Los Angeles. We're going to talk about the closure of the I-10, some of the reasons possibly behind a fire that has shut down this major highway. And in addition to that, a story very near and dear to Ryan's heart, Oregon having a little bit of second thoughts about total decriminalization of all drugs. We are going to talk about the Supreme Court, which has released a new ethics code and format. Ryan actually read through the entire thing, so I'll be asking him a lot about that. President Biden as well, lots of concerns. Media is waking up. You know, now at this point, they're like, oh my God, this man is so old. How the hell do we drag him across the finish line? And then Ryan, for now, you're going to be our resident Spanish expert.
Got it.
What the hell is going on in Spain? Tucker's on the ground. What's going on there? Ryan will explain all of it to us. So before we get any of that, Ryan, you want to plug the book?
Yeah, let's
what do we
do
got
it.
here? Okay, it's The Squad.
The Squad.
All right, and
The
it is
Squad.
AOC and the Hope of the Political Revolution. You guys are going to be hearing a lot about it. It's an excellent book, and we will also have a link down in the description. It helps him with the pre-order links and all of that. But don't worry, you have
those
a month to
pre-orders.
hear about it. Yeah,
And in a week and a half or so, right after Thanksgiving, if you're in DC, I'll be at Politics and Prose with Crystal.
that's right. So Crystal will be interviewing in Politics and Prose. As I said last time, that's how you truly have made it.
That's
to
right. There you
Washington.
go.
You get the Politics and Prose thing. And you're
The big
guaranteed
one,
on
the flagship.
You're guaranteed on the New York
right
Times
next to the
bestseller list.
child sex trafficking pizza place. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I've actually been there. I looked around in the basement. There was nothing.
It turns out there is no basement. There's actually not a basement.
All right. Anyway, all right. We could have too much fun here. Let's start with Israel. Let's go ahead and get to our first element here in terms of what is actually happening on the ground and also in terms of who controls what. President Biden weighing in about the current attacks on the hospital where Israel claims that this is a Hamas center. The people in the hospital, the doctors disputing that. Here's what President Biden had to say.
Have you expressed any specific concerns to Israel on that, sir?
Well, I have not been reluctant in expressing my concerns what's going on. And it's my hope and expectation that there will be less intrusive action relative to the hospital. We're in contact and we're with the Israelis. Also, there's an effort to take this pause to deal with the release of prisoners. And that's being negotiated as well with the Qataris that are engaged. And so I remain somewhat hopeful. But the hospital must be protected.
And any
So that's a big question around what he's saying, Ryan. Part of the reason is that we need to protect the hospital. There was some reporting last night, very late last night. I wanted to get your take on, also update the audience. David Ignatius, who's basically like an employee of the CIA who happens to work over at the Washington Post, he claims that a forthcoming 5-day ceasefire is going to happen imminently and that there will also be a release of the majority of the hostages from Hamas and then also the release of Palestinians being held in Israeli prison. But it's one of those where we don't know the exact details. As I said, this is Ignatius who is saying it. It's possible that it may not materialize. I did want to flag it for the audience and also possibly get any of your reaction.
So he was sourcing that to an Israeli official, but because, as you said, because this is David Ignatius, he's not running anything without running it by his. He's very well sourced in the deep state. So he's running. This is what I heard. This follows a scoop from Reuters, which actually I think was just based on Hamas's Telegraph channel, which if you're an Israeli, you are not allowed to read, and we'll talk about that later. That said that Hamas was ready to release 70 women and children in exchange for women and children being released from administrative detention in Israel. And so this builds on that. You saw Biden sort of mention a pause that he's been pushing, and they've been pushing back on. They can only Israel can only push back on the U.S. for so long. Like, it's not really up to them. They can drag it out, but we really are doing all of this.
This is an important point.
It looks like it's happening.
This is an important point. It actually kind of ties into the security situations. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. This was a pretty important release from the defense minister. This is from the Times of Israel correspondent. He says that according to their defense minister, quote, Hamas has now lost control of the Gaza Strip as the IDF moves to capture Gaza City. There is no force of Hamas capable of now stopping the IDF. The IDF is advancing to every point. Hamas organization has lost control of Gaza. Terrorists are fleeing south. Civilians are looting Hamas bases. They have no confidence in the government. As of Israeli forces, he says, according to plans and carry out the tasks exactly and lethally for advancing, and that they have now intensified activity against the tunnels in the recent days. So I'm kind of reading this in a couple of different ways, Ryan. There was a very fascinating comment from the Israeli foreign minister yesterday, and he said, Israel has enough international legitimacy for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. So I've been thinking about this entire military operation really in the context of the Iraq war. So during Iraq, there were multiple phases of the U.S. occupation and of the war. Phase 1, the easiest phase in retrospect, was just destroying the Iraqi army and taking Baghdad. That was a conventional military, basically had no trouble doing it. It took 3 weeks. President Bush marks the occasion, mission accomplished, and all of that. It turns out that the war really began the day after mission accomplished, and that's where we had to deal with counterinsurgency. Who the hell is going to govern this mess? Who do we decide is legitimate? That's when the attacks on U.S. forces start to trickle up and then eventually explode. And next thing you know, we have a full-blown civil war. America is in charge. We have these fake elections and all this stuff going on. It's total chaos, and it descends into what we think of the conflict today. So I really believe that they are in the phase 1 sort of the conflict. They've got the U.S. support at this point. Militarily, I mean, I just checked this morning, their official number of IDF who've been killed in action is 47. It's not nothing, but it's not particularly high death toll. However, they are getting to the phase now where they claim Hamas has lost control of the Gaza Strip, which leads to the now what question. We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about the Palestinian Authority, Bibi Netanyahu rejecting it, around what the prospect of who the hell is going to govern this space post-Hamas and all of that, even if they can't accomplish their objective. I'm curious what you think of all of that.
And I would add even a phase 1A to I think what is a good analogy. And phase 1A would be the shock and awe campaign. And Israel, the IDF has done its and continues its own shock and awe campaign. The difference here is that, okay, you have reduced northern Gaza and almost all of Gaza City to rubble, and Hamas has gone out through its tunnels down into southern Gaza Strip. I guess congratulations, mission accomplished. But I think anybody could predict that if you drop, more bombs, as we know that they now have, on Gaza in the last month than the U.S. dropped on Afghanistan like the entire time, then yes, you're going to get the 20 to 30,000 people who are under arms under Hamas to flee south. Like, yes.
Okay.
But then it goes to your point. Now what? And Netanyahu has said, well, we'll figure that out afterwards. We're not going to worry about that now. He has also said, well, we're going to occupy it indefinitely. The U.S. is like, no, you're not. You're not doing that. He's like, okay, well, we're not going to let the Palestinian Authority back in. And U.S. and Arab countries are like, what do you mean you're not going to let? So who?
Yes.
Who's going to run this? Not you, and it's not them. Which leads then a lot of people to say, wait a minute, do you plan on there not being people there?
Well, the big question, too, is who the hell is going to run the election? You say you're going to have an election. I mean, America ran into this problem where we were like, we had to decide basically who was allowed to run and who's not. Oh, it turns out that didn't have a lot of democratic legitimacy with the Iraqi people, and it took decades in order for that to actually materialize, if it even does materialize today.
And in 2006, when George W. Bush oversaw that election, Hillary Clinton famously, semi-publicly was like, what are you, an idiot? You would hold an election and not be able to rig the outcome.
Right.
Which, when you step back a second and think about who's saying that, it's kind of an amusing thing to have expressed publicly about elections, that they're really just theater to put in place who we want to run. She was livid. She's like, how, as a custodian of the American empire, could you hold an election which allows an adversary of.
In a certain point, she's not wrong. In that, if you're going to militarily occupy a country, and then of course, you're going to try and rig the election in the, in the direction that you want. And in fact, the irony of all of this is why we have to spend so much time on Iraq. Is that the 2005 Israeli deoccupation or whatever of Gaza, removal of settlers, and then the subsequent election was entirely done at the behest of President Bush, because it was all part of his second inaugural address, the 2005 democracy promotion nonsense, which eventually led to the election of Hamas, and that's really what got us to where we are right now. Exactly. Right. And then we had a coup and a civil war, and it completely failed because it turns out we can't do 98,000. We can't even do 3 things at once, let alone 12.
Can't even do coups anymore.
What we were trying to do at that time. So the point, though, is that much of this also roots back to that time period. It's why it's very instructive and why we spend a lot of time talking and thinking about it. It also is in the context of what the blowback on America is going to look like. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. This was actually a map that was compiled over by Fox News. I actually thought they did a pretty good job. What you can see here are now the 52 attacks on U.S. military forces since October 17th. Note the date, October 17th, because there were still many more before that. It's only this is the number that we have. They span and run the gamut all across of Syria and all across Iraq as well, from the Baghdad Diplomatic Center, where the Green Zone, infamous Green Zone, all the way to Erbil in the north, and as well the Al-Assad Air Base, where we have so many Iraqi and U.S. forces that are stationed there. Then we have the Al-Tanf garrison in Syria and the number of U.S. special operations bases, forward operating bases, that are all across Syria that are ostensibly there for an anti-ISIS mission. But these guys really are, just sitting ducks at a certain point, because they don't have a huge amount of force protection on the base, because these are smaller locations. So they're just sitting there. I mean, they have a limited amount of protection, and it's just we're in a tit-for-tat game with these Iranian proxy forces. Yesterday, we brought everyone the news, Ryan, in terms of what it looks like right now for the prospect of a Lebanon-Israel war, and with Hezbollah. Now, for now, and hopefully, things are not escalating, but the escalation ladder is being climbed. So we don't know if total war is going to emerge. I don't think anybody actually wants that. The U.S. doesn't want it. The Secretary of Defense called the Israeli defense minister and was like, hey, you better be cutting this out. Be like, we are not getting embroiled into this. You need to cool it. Why are you having these long-range strikes all the way deep in their territory? At the same time, the Israelis are like, well, Hezbollah has been firing anti-tank missiles at us. They've killed a number of IDF soldiers. I believe an Israeli citizen at an electrical plant was actually killed by one of these missiles just 2 days ago. So, everybody is a tit-for-tat motions that we are right now. And the U.S. is actually telegraphing part of the reason why it doesn't want this to happen in a very subtle way. Let's put this up there, please, on the screen. The U.S. Central Command, which is the area of operations for the Middle East, tweeted out, quote, "For the third time in 8 days, B-1 Lancers have conducted missions in the U.S. CENTCOM area of responsibility, demonstrating the ability to rapidly project combat power." Now, why, Ryan, would you be tweeting out pictures of a heavy strategic bomber, which was built to drop nuclear weapons on the Soviet Union? I'm pretty sure that has nothing to do with Gaza, and honestly, even Lebanon and Hezbollah. There's only one target that message was telegraphed to.
I mean, when you've got a sexy B-1 like that,
listen,
you just want to share those selfies, right?
Yeah.
You can't. You just can't help it.
Right.
There was there was a statement from a Hamas spokesperson out of Lebanon yesterday that sounded a little bit like cope that goes to this question of Hezbollah, where they said Hezbollah's red line is if Hamas is completely eliminated from Gaza and Gaza is flattened.
Yeah.
So it was Hamas trying to explain to the broader Middle East why Hezbollah hasn't gotten more aggressively into the war against Israel, because Hamas very early on was sending signals that they were hoping that this would create more of a regional conflagration. Right. But those 4 attacks that we saw since the U.S. strikes on Iranian proxies suggest that this kind of counterintuitive strategy that U.S. has of de-escalation through escalation, they're like, if we keep attacking, that will prevent them from further attacks. Shows that's not working. And it doesn't make any sense to begin with, and it's also not working. The more we attack, then the more they fire back. And the big fear is, like, as you were pointing out, these bases are not terribly well guarded.
Right.
that you could have some Benghazi situation.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's always the nightmare scenario. It's like you just never know, and it just takes a single instance of one person who didn't plan exactly the right way, and things are popping off. At the same time, Ryan, you flagged something you wanted to discuss. Let's put this up there, please, on the screen. This internal State Department memo, which was actually blasting Biden and U.S. policy. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So the State Department has what's called a dissent channel, and the State Department officials at the top brag about how proud they are of this, that it allows people to air their grievances and that's the way that you get to kind of the right decision at the end. You hear from all sides. In reality, they're not so pleased that this dissent channel exists. They're super not pleased when this dissent channel leaks into the public. This one, the ones that have been coming out recently have been just extraordinarily aggressive. This one from State Department officials hits Biden for what they say accurately spreading misinformation about the Gaza death toll. And they use the phrase misinformation, which is pretty ironic given the way that like the Department of Homeland Security was talking about criminalizing it at some point. And so in their worldview, they're accusing him of an impeachable offense. But this goes back to his claim that he made to Laura Barron Lopez in that presser that you can't trust the Gaza Health Ministry's death tolls. Since then, and before then, everybody understood from Israel to human rights organizations that these numbers are accurate. Like if you go back and look, the IDF estimates around civilian casualties or around casualties in Gaza, I should say, are roughly the same as the Ministry of Health was always coming up with. And the State Department knew that. And the administration knew that because the administration and the State Department were always relying on these numbers. And so to have Biden say that we don't know whether the Palestinians are telling the truth about these, sent a signal that there would be no consequences for civilian casualties because you could just deny them. And so the State Department pushed back on that. There's now a letter coming out from, I think in the New York Times, from like 400 Biden staffers. Part of this trend of staffers and lower level officials pushing back. At The Intercept today, we have a letter from about 150 Obama staffers to Obama saying, "Come on, get tougher."
Interesting.
On Biden, kind of a reaction to another letter that's going out. So there is a lot of dissent going on because you can only deny this, for so long.
And then actually all of that kind of flies in the face, though, of how the official Democratic Party is operating. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is important. Can you tell us about what you have here? It says that the House of Representatives has organized bipartisan member transportation to the rally tomorrow to support Israel. It's being run by the Democratic Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries. So there is a protest or whatever, a march.
Gigantic march today.
March today in support of Israel. And you're saying House Democrats, the leader actually, is organizing transportation for members to go into this march for support of Israel.
The organizers are expecting 200,000 to 300,000 people.
Wow, that'll be just as big as the ceasefire
Which could be just as big as the other one. I think you're going to have buses from all over the country coming to D.C. There is a small peace bloc that is part of it that wanted to say, I stand against anti-Semitism. I also stand against war. But most of it is just generally supportive of Israel's war effort. And so to have the House of Representatives making bipartisan travel arrangements, first of all, just walk. I mean, it's from
Thank you.
We're talking like 10 blocks.
Yeah.
Like,
less actually.
Less than 10 blocks.
That's ridiculous.
But so the letter that I obtained says if you're a member of Congress that wants to go to this rally, we have arranged transportation and RSVP to Hakeem Jeffries. Basically, this is later today. The House Foreign Affairs Committee. I also reported this yesterday. Will be streaming that Hamas atrocity video that the IDF has been screening around, to journalists throughout Israel, and also they did it in New York, and then you hear from people who've come out of it. And so, if you are a Palestinian, watching this as the death tolls, who knows? Maybe it's pushing 30,000. The ministry official who was in charge of the count was at Al-Shifa Hospital.
Right.
So how is that? We can now agree with Biden that we might not be able to rely on these numbers as much anymore, but in the wrong direction. It might be actually much worse than we understand. So if you're somebody in Gaza watching this, you're not seeing the United States as a kind of interlocutor who's trying to bring people together to end this. You're seeing them just 100% squarely.
That's what I think, has to be squared here. And it's just obvious. Like the entire Democratic leadership from the president on down, like there's maybe 20, 30 or whatever, congressmen.
18 to 20, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why I just think people also need to be very real about where the U.S. political system is right now. Whether it is reflective of actual like small d Democratic concern, I don't think so. Although I do still think people underrate, just how pro-Israel a lot of the American population is. We'll see. And, a reflection of that is going to be, we had a big ceasefire protest. It was here in the U.S. We're having a massive protest here.
Austin
as well.
yesterday had they said 10,000, but you look at the drone footage. It's like the whole the whole city was out in the streets.
London, actually, we'll probably cover it on Thursday. Just some of the outbreak.
One of the biggest in British history.
I was going to say, I think since 2003, it might be one of the largest protests to actually take place there. So big stuff is happening.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.